This episode is brought to you by SPI Logistics, the premier freight agent logistics firm in North America. For over 40 years, SPI has been diligently building the most successful freight agent network to provide first-class relationships for our shippers, receivers, and carrier partners. We are more than another transportation network. We are a dedicated team of professionals united by one singular purpose, and that is to expedite our agents' success. All of our agents are set up for success on day one, as they are provided with a full suite of support staff that is ready to assist them with everything from after-hours emergencies to financial and administrative needs on a no-fee basis. This way, you can focus on continuing to grow your business. There is no financial risk to start, and you have the ability to earn up to 75% in commissions. If you are looking to take control of your financial future and build your business with the backing of one of the most successful logistics firms in North America, visit www.spi3pl.com to learn more. Do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve. So you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Wednesday, everybody. We're going to jump right in. I got a very special guest for you guys. I'm going to pull him up here in a couple of minutes. We're going to be talking about fraud, identity, all of that stuff, what's going on Capitol Hill right now, and kind of like what we see that trickling down into the day-to-day freight operations out there. But before we get into that, you guys know what we got to do. We got This Week in Freight powered by my friends over at DAT, and we are doing a dry van analysis today. And like with all of these lanes, you guys, this is 100% viewers submitted. All right. All we're doing here is helping you guys understand that most freight markets historically perform the same throughout the year. There's going to be peaks and valleys and everything. And we got to find that stuff, because we got to find the solution. Like, that's our literal job. And that's what our customers are expecting for us. So today's lane is Dallas, Texas to Denver, Colorado. And for those of you out there who are not aware, Denver historically is a bad market to go into, because there's just not a lot of freight coming out of there. It's the Florida of the Rocky Mountains, put it that way. And it's always been this way. So it's like you're going to naturally see a higher rate per mile going in there. Carriers will always bake that rate going in there, because they don't know what they're going to get coming out, right? It could be a partial. They could be sitting there for a couple of days. So it's like when you're pricing freight, you need to be very aware of the market it's going into. And then furthermore, look at the miles, right? Like we always talk about this on this show. I pay attention to the loaded miles almost more than anything, because days of the week really matter. And there's going to be an exponentially higher rate quoted to you if this has to pick up on a Thursday for whatever reason and it can't deliver till Monday, or Friday to Monday. 800 miles isn't the best weekend run. Guys want 1,500 miles. They want to run. They don't want to stop. They don't want to have any downtime. And especially going into Colorado, they might be sitting there coming out, right? So you're going to bake that in. But some points of emphasis here, right? If we look at the 1-year marker here, it's sitting at about 2,300 is what this lane is paying. And again, I'm not telling you guys what to quote, but if we look at March of 2025 compared to March of 2026, there's a big jump here, right? Like $700 big. And why do we think that is? Those are those questions that we need to be asking ourselves as we're going in. I think we're really starting to see tightness happening out there in certain markets. And I'm almost like starting to draw a lot of parallels between the non-domiciled CDL enforcement, some of those states that you're seeing who are doing it very, very religiously. You're starting to see a lot of that more in the rates in those markets that are starting to increase earlier in the year, because that rate in particular is, I mean, it's exponentially higher than a peak market here back in July of when it looks like over the year it starts to peak up. So, you know, again, if you're in that situation right now where you have contracted freight with your customers and, you know, maybe you just put an RFP in January or February, and now look at what happened in March. Again, I like to be the last to kind of wave the white flag in certain situations, but depending on what you bid on this, I don't know if this lane is going to drop anytime soon. Again, if we're looking at historical freight markets, all right, the Colorados of the world, the Floridas of the world, outside of produce season, a lot of those lanes are going to be disproportionately higher than others due to the fact that the markets coming out are so bad. And, if there's a lacking capacity at all, you guys are not going to take that freight. All right. Not without a higher price point, right? Like I'm still a firm believer there's still a truck for every load in America. It just depends on what you're going to have to pay on that one. But if you're going into it, again, have those conversations with your customers. Don't assume anybody just has it all figured out and they know that. That's why they hire us to work with us to bring this information to them. And then obviously, as long as everything continues in the Middle East and fuel prices are going to be elevated, that is also going to be another big marker out there. So with this lane, it's going up. It's looking like it's going to continue to rise out there. So if you are moving Dallas into Denver and you're in a spot market truck in hand style situation, you're in a very strong position. But if you are in that RFP, you contracted it out, this might be one of those lanes I would want to address with my customer right away about things changing here. And depending on how long this goes, you could be underwater. But that's just what I see happening out there. Again, you guys, this is this week's Dry Van lane for This Week in Freight, powered by D18. If you want your lane broken down, again, I just tell you guys how I go about this on my day-to-day when I'm out there calling shippers and prospecting business. Just trying to help you guys read the markets at a little bit more of a granular level than what you might see out there in the mainstream media. But speaking of mainstream media, and the hottest topic in freight is always going to be fraud and everything else. And I always like having my good friend Mark Funk on the show to talk about all of this. So Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
No, Chris, thanks for having me on there. I appreciate it.
No, dude, it's been a while. And yeah, no, I got you. Oh, is there a delay on your end?
Yeah, it's a little bit delayed.
Okay. All right, let's give it a whirl here then and give it a shot. So man, what's been going on in your world? Obviously, you're out there on the compliance front with fraud and all of this stuff going on. What are you seeing out there in the market right now?
Well, fraud, I mean, when you look at it, you got the traditional double brokering that happens all the time. That's going to continue to happen. A big trend that I'm seeing right now across the industry, carriers will say their email got hacked, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen that or read that yet, but that's a big thing that we're seeing a lot of times. You'll see these identity alerts pop up a lot where a carrier says my email was hacked. Now, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's what they're saying, and the load ends up getting, it is stolen. Some of the truly, I guess, the aspects of that where it was actually hacked. Maybe it was a bad actor who used to work for the carrier and then they left and the carrier never changed their password. That bad actor goes on to somewhere else and they still have access to that carrier's email. And a lot of times they'll go in, they'll set up rules to where they'll book a load with a broker and then they'll set a rule up as soon as it comes in, forward it to this email and then delete it. And, so for those carriers who are legitimate carriers and a mistake just happened, they don't know that this is going on. And I'm seeing that a lot. And then obviously the other trend that I'm seeing are, MCs are purchased, and that's a little bit more difficult to identify and track.
Do you because that's one of those ones, and I just broke that article down yesterday about that with how businesses are bought and sold inside of transportation now, and that's one of those things where it's like, do you see it going as far as because how do they stop the duplicate MCs of people going out there and buying multiple authorities and then they're just essentially waiting to reincarnate overnight? Do you see a world where you're only going to be able to own one authority per business coming up here? And do you think that there's going to be steps in place to stop that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be a world where you only have one MC. The FMCSA, they're putting new protocols in place and they're making it a little bit more difficult to crack down on these chameleon carriers and whatnot. But what's actually transpired over time is you had these bad actors who went in and they bought blocks of 50, 100, whatever MCs, and now they own those and they're sitting dormant, right? And so when they burn through one, they go to the other, and they burn through another one, they go to the other. So some of the things that the FMCSA that they're wanting to put in place and go through that process will help mitigate some of that risk, but I don't think it's ever going to go away. The part that the thing that really scares me is if you've got a carrier who's got an MC and they're posting on Facebook or on some of these different boards that you can go onto and say, hey, I'm selling my MC. The bad actor buys that MC and they don't file the proper paperwork and stuff like that. What they do is they also say, hey, listen, I'm going to give you some additional money and I'm going to get your cell phone number and I'm going to get your email address as well. That is a little bit more scary. There's some different things you can do, some different vectors that you can go down to identify that, but it makes it more difficult.
Mm-hmm. I think identity, a lot of this stuff has been going on for a long time, right? And I'm glad that it's starting to get the actual attention out there. Again, the current administration has put more of an emphasis on the trucking industry than anything I've ever seen in of my career. And I look at a lot of where we're at right now, and it's like, how much longer are we going to be able to, I look at how much longer are the legitimate carriers going to be able to survive in these times, right? When it's like, if we're looking at it where people are just, because in the world of freight brokerage, most people are always going to chase the cheapest truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the entire business model, improve their margin percentages and everything else. Do you think we're going to kind of filter through a lot of the what's left of the great carriers that are out there because they just can't compete anymore? And I look at it where it's like, if we're allowing these practices to continue to happen out there in the industry, is that going to drive out what's left of the legitimate providers?
Yeah. So Chris, you talk about a couple different things I want to speak to, right? So the legitimate carriers, they're going to survive, but they're going to survive at the price of the shipper. The cost, it's going to go up because fraud doesn't just affect that broker, doesn't just affect that carrier or that shipper, it affects the industry. Right. So when you look at the fraud signals and the data that's out there, I mean, it's enormous. And you've got different things that are taking place. You mentioned this administration and how they've jumped into some of these different things. So they've got different things they're putting in place with the fraud and try to mitigate that type of stuff. But, and I'm not pointing a finger at one thing or another, but when it comes to the industry and what's going on and what these current legitimate carriers are suffering through, a lot of it has to do with some of these non-domiciled drivers, right? Where maybe they come in and maybe they shouldn't have us. I'm not saying not all non-domiciled drivers. I'm just saying some of them, right? So they come in and they're willing to work for a rate that's below what, a legitimate carrier would, who follows the hours of service rules and make sure that their equipment's safe. And they do all these types of things. So the government itself, what they've done is they put that Band-Aid on it. I'm going to call it a Band-Aid very quickly with the change for the non-domiciled stuff. That's what you saw in the news where California was fighting it and all these different things. And then the final rule went into place, I think it was March 16th. And what that was is basically, hey, it put a pause on issuing non-domiciled, but everybody kind of freaked out. But what a lot of people don't realize is those people who have a non-domiciled CDL, they can continue to have that until it expires. Mm-hmm. So in some cases, that's, 3, 4, 5 years. And then there's an extension that's on that. So that capacity for those drivers continue to exist. But the larger, more important role that I think will have a big impact in the industry and will ultimately help these legitimate carriers, to your point, is the Delilah law. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. Okay. And the biggest thing with that is if that's passed, it just went through committee and it passed committee and now it's into the House, it makes that, if it passes, it makes it a law, right? Mm-hmm. So, hey, now it's a law. So regardless of a future administration, whether the right or left, it's harder to change, and then there's different things in that. So, it includes English language proficiency, and that makes that a requirement, whereas the final ruling doesn't. It also gets into the CDL training and making sure that they're done. It also says no foreign dispatch services. So there's a lot of things wrapped up into that law that can have a big impact on the industry and to help legitimate carriers. But the shippers, and being a broker, it's educating your shippers to these conditions that are happening in the marketplace because the price is going to go up.
Yeah. It's, there's a lot of things coming down right now, right? When I'm kind of like looking out, I think that if they're going to continue down to hammer and close all of these loopholes that fraudulent bad actors are being able to operate in, I wish media would do a better job of delineating the difference between a legitimate non-domiciled driver and somebody who has an illegitimate non-domiciled operation. And that, because it's like, again, they're blending a lot of lines right now, and it's affecting legitimate providers. It really is.
For sure.
But it's like, I look at a lot of these things. I'm a massive supporter of closing any and all loopholes that are allowing any of these fraudulent actors to come in here and operate and take advantage of the system. I've said this often, and I'm going to continue to say this. I just want an equal playing field, right? Like, I don't want any handouts for anybody. I want us all on a level playing field, and I want the best people to win ultimately in the long run. And I see a lot of, with everything coming so fast down the pipe, Mark, my crystal ball is fraud, freight theft, like all of that is going to get exponentially worse here over the next 12 to 18 months, because it's going to be like a mad dash for cash for these guys who are like, all right, we got to get as much as we can in as a short amount of time, because we can't reincarnate anymore. We can't be a chameleon carrier anymore. So it's like our days are numbered. I just, that's just kind of where I see it. I'm not trying to fear monger, but like, I'm just trying to connect the dots behind the scenes. And, there's always going to be criminals, like, because obviously they don't care about the law, but I think it's, it's a lot more widespread than some people want to admit. And I think that's what it could potentially drive here.
Yeah. To your point, bad actors are going to always be bad actors, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not going to go away. And it's kind of like when you want to protect your house, you put your sign out there, maybe you put bars on your window or whatever you do, you get a big dog and you make it so that that's not the target that they want to go to. So I think these bad actors will refocus a lot of their efforts. And, for me personally, I would look for rail theft to grow exponentially, right? I don't know how much you know about the rail theft and what's going on, but there's some serious operations with rail theft that's happening out in the Southwest area, and over in the West. And what's happening is you've got these organized gangs, and what they're doing is they're getting onto these rail cars out in the desert. And I think Fraud Girl actually had something on this not too long ago. And what they do is they actually mark these containers. They get on, they check the containers. Is it something good? They put shoestrings on it, close the door, and then they go on and they hit it later on. So I think that will happen. I think they'll look for other vectors that they can get into that are weak spots. They're not going to go away. Yeah, they're definitely not going to go away. Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see, right? Because I think that, again, if we want to talk about solutions, and if anybody sees me in person at a conference, you know how to find me. I'll tell you exactly what we do to thwart a lot of this stuff in like the load booking process, because there's some very clear, like, I think no matter what, like, yes, people are getting more and more sophisticated, but people are also inherently lazy, and they're going to stick to the same tactics that have worked for them in the past. And you got to have you got to build a stone wall around your freight, right? And there's some very clear indicators that somebody knows what they're talking about or not that I personally look for on every single time that I'm talking to. Okay, like if I'm booking a load, we grill people, because again, the more questions you ask, the less likely somebody wants to even deal with you, because again, they're looking for that quick buck. Do you see that still happening kind of out there, Mark? Like if you're looking at a lot, because like you live in compliance. Do you think that the majority of the stuff that happens out there is because people aren't applying standards at all? And this is kind of like a broad industry question.
Yeah, you know what, Chris, I do. When I look at some of the thefts that happen and you read about them, you had that tequila theft, you had some other things happen. Just recently, what was Tucker Carlson had his shipment stolen. When you start getting down into the details of that, you got to start saying, okay, well, hey, how is this vetted? What's going on, right? And if you get, listen, I'm a broker, you're a broker, I get it, but there's some brokers out there, and they see some dollar signs and they think this is a quick hit, and they don't do their due diligence, and there's that old saying that, hey, you wouldn't have a crime if everybody locked their door. right? So if you take that same concept and people who were brokering a freight did their due diligence and asked the right questions and followed up and have some of the right technology to prevent some of these things from happening, it would make it more difficult because some of the stuff I read and some of the stuff I follow up on, I'm just amazed at how this happened, how it just happened.
And that's the thing, Mark, is it's like, obviously every situation is unique out there. And I think like right now in particular, this is like what's going on in the market where there is an improvement in rates. Obviously rates are up in, some markets. I'm not going to go across the board and say everywhere, but that is where it opens the door for a lot of these fraudulent actors to come in because people are getting killed. Brokers are going to get killed on rates here. And if they're out there trying to cover their load and, they hypothetical example, the lane was paying $1,000. Now it's at $1,800. Their contractor's rate is at $1,500. So they're out there trying to get as close to break even as possible. People are going to start like paying attention to this stuff, Mark. And then they're going to be like, hey man, I see you got it up for 18. I got to get my driver home. What do you need? Like, I'll do it for 12. They're going to come and then the broker's going to be like, boom, this is it. Fucking finally, we got to like, that is the easiest trap that so many people fall into because again, I love my core carriers. They're not giving me a break on my rate because they like me, like not that much lower. And I think that's like the gateway that people try and exploit or the brokers who are knowingly posting it for well below market because that's a strategy I see out there, right? Like I still see people posting freight for $1.20 a mile and shit like that. You're opening your doors right there for fraud because there's going to be people who are going to come in, they're going to find out the commodity, and then they're going to be like, oh yeah, I'll do it for $1,200. Oh, sure. Because they're going to steal the load.
Yeah. Right. If nothing else, criminals are good on their ROI, right?
Yeah.
They take the load, they sell it, they make their money on it. They're not going to pay, listen, that $1,200 is all fake. And typically they're going to get it. And here's the bad part. The broker gets duped because they didn't do their due diligence, right? Oh, $1,200, right? And then they turn around and they post it to somebody else. And then, a victim carrier looks at it and says, well, this normally pays $1,800 right now. Oh, wait, I'm going to get $3,000 to run it. I'll take it. Yeah. Right. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Because then ultimately again, even from the carrier side, these are those identifiers, right? Like if you're running a lane or you see, you've made some outbound calls or you've gotten some inbound calls from some brokers and they're all quoting you $1,800. And then there's one guy's at $3,000, like you're talking about, Mark. And then they're selling, oh, it's the hottest shipment of all time. And we just need to get it out, blah, 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 blah. That's a massive red flag. And I think like, those are, because like ultimately the legitimate carriers who are hauling this freight, they're the ones who are getting screwed. Like, yeah, all of us in the transaction are at the end of the day, but like the ones who are at the most risk exposure are the legitimate carriers who are going in and thinking we got this payday that's coming in. They thought it was Tampa to, the original broker was moving it from Tampa to Philly. And then now the fraudulent guy has it going from Tampa to Savannah, paying $3,000 or just something stupid like that. And then that's just how it all starts.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it just kind of breaks down from there. Or, they pick it up, they're getting paid too much. Another red flag is, oh, hey, by the way, we changed the destination. Now we need to go take it to Southern California for something, right? Yeah.
No, it's, I look at it is where a lot of the attention that's being gained right now is great, but a lot of the tactics that these individuals are utilizing to steal freight haven't changed, man. It's almost all been the same since I've been doing this job. And that's why it's like, again, I'm not saying it's easy to identify this stuff, but like, you got to trust your gut. And it sounds overly simple, but if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Like, I hate to break it to people out there who think, but like, trust me, they're not doing you any favors. They're not. Like they need a fair price. And that's how the free market works, right? If the market's now at $2,000 and it was at $1,500, guess what? Pay your guys $2,000. You got to work to get some additional money. You got to do what you got to do as a broker, but nobody's doing you any favors.
Yeah, no, agreed. And Chris, here's part of this too, right? Instead of just being a broker or whatnot to your customer, if people looked at it a little bit differently and said, hey, you know what? Instead of being a broker, hey, I'm going to move this load for you. Got any additional freight today? Where's your lanes? Stop all that. Educate your customer. be a supply chain consultant to your customer, because if you're telling your customer what's going on, what's happening in the industry, how prices are going up, things like that, then perhaps, maybe not, but perhaps they're a little bit more understanding. They can get you some more money on what's going on, right?
Mhm.
And then you're not in that situation where you're paying. You're thinking you're getting this great deal for $1,200 because you've got this much in it, and it's a little bit different. So educate the customer, make sure the customer knows what's going on. That's the first thing. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right? And then to your point there, trust your gut. If you're talking to a carrier and something just doesn't feel right, don't do it.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many tools at your disposal now to kind of, like the digital footprints that are out there by a lot of these individuals, I think is so much easier to track now with a lot of carrier vetting software that's out there. Like it's all, Carrier, Sure, Highway, DAT's everybody's got a product out there. The digital footprint is there. You need to utilize this stuff, right?
Sure.
Because there's just so much, because again, it's like, man, when we're out there and we're booking freight, Mark, and we're seeing some of this stuff, and I'm going into some of this vetting software, and I'm like, come on, man. Like, you don't even have a truck registered to you. How are you calling on freight right now, right? Like, you have a trailer registered to you, but you don't even have a power unit, and you expect, like, it's baffling to me that this is allowed to even go on.
Well, yeah, it's, those are older school players, probably older school bad actors who have thrived on brokers who haven't done their due diligence, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing, man. And that's why it's like, I look at it, no matter what, a lot of these situations we find ourselves in today, the way to defend your business from it's very simple. In my opinion, it's very simple. It's just not easy to apply every single time when you're struggling to cover that load now. And for a lot of people in this industry, this is the first time they've ever seen real tight capacity. Like,
right.
The first time, they've never experienced this before. And again, like, I've been talking about this for like 7-8 months now, that when it happens, it's going to be a very tough pill to swallow for a lot of individuals out there. And you're going to be making 30, 40, 50 outbound calls just to find a truck to hopefully lose $200 on a load. Mm-hmm. That's where a lot of these things thrive, because the desperation is going to start to creep in. And, you've maybe failed on a couple of loads this month for your customer, and your customer's threatening to shut you off. And if you don't come through, and then you unfortunately find yourself in that situation. And, I just look at it with a lot of these market shifts that go on, and you see rates increasing out there, and you go and you have that conversation with your customer, like, hey, we got to increase our prices. And they tell you, we got to go find another provider. You have to let that process happen, because every time I've been through that, in due time, the freight comes back to you, because
sure.
They're going to do their due diligence, and that's fine. But like, you got to protect your business at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure. But, and then to that point, all along, if you're that supply chain consultant to your customer, you're sending them information. You're not asking for freight. You're just, hey, I want to send you this email so you know. Hey, I want to make sure you're aware of this, right? It's just those touch points. And if nothing else, they may start looking at that, and you're still on their radar. So whenever that other provider fails, let me go back to Chris, because he keeps sending me these emails. Even though I stopped using him, let me take a look at what's going on here. It's a relationship, right?
No, and that's it, right? And you got to look at it like there's going to be pockets of contention. And I think that, that's usually when most people just kind of like give up, Mark. They just quit. They're like, oh, whatever. I don't want that. It's not easy anymore. Those are the opportunities. Like this is the market. Like what I'm starting to see. It hasn't made it the 30-day mark in my mind yet. So I'm not going to go and be like, oh, everything's different now. Cause it could even back out here in the next 6 weeks. We don't know. But I look at it as like, this is the market that I went back into business for, because like I've seen this happen before. I've seen tight capacity. Communication is going to solve all of your problems, plain and simple. And that's how you got to approach it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would agree. And to your point, we don't know what the market's going to do. I mean, I can tell you all the indicators that I'm looking at with the tender rejections, rates, driver pool shrinking, regulations, so on and so forth, tensions across the world. I think that this market's going to be here for a while. And I think capacity is going to be tight, and fraud is always going to be prevalent in everything that we do.
No, I agree. Mark, thank you so much for your time this morning. That is going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. As always, if you got value in what you heard and you're not subscribed, subscribe to the show, you guys. And if you're feeling ambitious, rank that show on iTunes and Spotify, because if you see value, your network's going to see it as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Came back with a bang, window down, yelling out money, anything. Hey, ooh, got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when I'm getting